Welcome, everybody, to another episode of ThriveCast. As you can tell by the name down below there, my name is DJ Eshelman, and I am your host. Good to be back with you again. I know it's been a few weeks for those of you watching live or whatever. It's been a while, and well, we've got some explaining to do, but we'll do that. We will do that. So it's good to have you with us today. Actually, I do want to bring on my co-host, Jeff Pitch. How's it going? And yeah, we're not hearing you today. We had a late start between Jeff and I, so I was wondering if this might happen, but it's okay. I'll just keep vamping until I hear his voice.
How about this?
There we go.
Hey, I can figure out technical issues.
Well, this is probably going to come in handy. The whole figuring out technical things. It's good to be someone in technology and know what they're talking about. And so
who's that?
Yeah, we've had we've taken a few weeks off. We actually it's been a month since we've done our last episode, and we thought we'd take a quick minute before we get started today and explain a little bit about what's going on. And so first off, the DJ's tired. And people may not think about how much goes into a lot of these episodes, but it actually does take quite a bit of coordination and kind of stuff like that. And with some other projects that I have going on, we just needed to take a little bit of a time to step back a little bit and kind of reevaluate. But we have bigger news. And another reason why we're going to probably be taking a little bit of a break in October as well, and kind of start a new season sometime after that. And that is because Jeff has something new he wants to tell you about.
I got a job. Yay! Yeah, so it was so bizarre. I shouldn't say bizarre, but it came on fast. I don't think I've ever been through something quite as fast as what this happened. But first off, I am now the field CTO at Rimo 3, RIMO 3, and working with a great bunch of people from the UK to Romania to the US. In fact, I was just telling some other people that it has been one of the most welcoming and great groups of people to have started last week Monday, so I'm 5, 6, 7 days into it, and I could not have asked for a better start so far. So from my perspective, I'm still going to be doing community work. You've seen field CTOs and the way they do things. That's going to be my tradition. Or following in those footsteps, a lot of interaction with community, a lot of interaction with companies, and everything in between. So really looking forward. I've already been thrown in the deep end, which is absolutely great. So finally, I've slept like a baby after everything was signed and ready to go. So it's been good. But as DJ was saying, that brings up the ThriveCast. And it just happens that it probably, for myself, getting the job was good timing, because it went along with where you're at as well, DJ. We just both need to get our feet underneath us again, sort of the same reason we had last time. But it's not dead. We're not dead. Well, I don't think I am.
I'm not dead.
Yeah, I'm not dead yet. So it's because there's more people to talk to. There's more episodes that we can do. There's more things that we can do. But we just can't dedicate the time like we could before. So
yeah, it's all good. So if you're here with us live, stick around for that end of the episode. We'll have a little bit of a after episode chat as well. But for the time being, congratulations, Jeff. Awesome stuff. It's going to be awesome to see what you're able to do with Rimo 3. It's going to be a lot of fun. So we'll have to hear more about that in an upcoming episode, whenever that ends up being. But I'll explain more about that after today's episode. More importantly, today got my friend Jenna Aidikoff. Now, this is kind of cool. So when I started working at Citrix in 2011 or so, I was there as what's called a resident consultant, which means that I'm somebody that pretended they knew what they were talking about and somehow got into this position of leading teams in consulting at Citrix. There came a moment where I realized that there were some things happening at Citrix, some developmental things and some staffing things that I just wasn't really aware enough of, and I wasn't getting procedurally. And so I approached somebody I was working with as more managerial side of things and said, "Hey, look, what I really need is just to take a few weeks stepping back and just let someone else lead from a project standpoint so I can learn more about the Citrix process and how to do that. And I can continue leading from a technical standpoint and we'll be stronger as a result." And so, yeah, I didn't know who they were going to pair me with. I was, I don't want to say scared, but at the same time, I was very concerned because I just recognized at that point that there was a crucial point coming up in my development and kind of moving forward in my career. I knew that this is something I needed um, to have in my life. So fortunately, I was paired with Jenna. So Jenna has an interesting story. She, like I said, worked with Citrix Consulting Services, but that wasn't originally her career plan. And so we're going to talk a little bit about that today. I think people are going to be fascinated by this story. But there's a lot about Jenna that I really have enjoyed over the years. Number one, which is her just great attitude about living. And so that's something we're also going to talk a little bit about today. We're going to talk about her work with Live Up programs and her working with those with special needs and that sort of thing. So we're going to enjoy talking about that. She's currently serving as Channel Business Manager at Palo Alto Networks. So let's welcome my good friend, Jenna Aidikoff. Hello.
Hello. And Jeff, congratulations.
Thank you.
To be here.
Thank you. It's been a long time coming.
Indeed. So I think to get started off with, Jenna, so you live in New York, and you're
Manhattan. I'm
in Manhattan now. Okay.
Big city.
Yeah. Upgraded. But you grew up in the area, like was it Long Island? I'm trying to remember.
Yes, I grew up on Long Island,
okay.
So not too far away, and luckily still able to go out. I try to go out at least once a month and see my family, though. During COVID, it was definitely a lot more frequent than that. So, a lot of colleagues got insight into what my childhood bedroom looked like. So, I was definitely part of that group.
Well, tell us a little bit about yourself growing up, then, because I think a lot of our folks we've had on have had varied backgrounds as far as how their childhood was and kind of how that started their career path. So, tell us a little bit about yourself as far as growing up in Long Island.
Yeah, so grew up, as CJ said, on Long Island, and I am the oldest of, I have two sisters, and we're actually pretty close in age. So we're, I think, right on the borderline of being considered Irish twins. We're about 18 months apart. So I don't remember life, what it was like without being a sibling. And really notably to the story is that I have two brilliant sisters that have taught me a lot. My middle sister is my sister Lauren, who is also my sister with special needs. And then my youngest sister is my sister Carrie, who continues to both be there as a sidekick on a lot of adventures and also as someone that is a great challenger that helps me continue to improve myself. So I'm very grateful to have grown up with the two of them. And I was always early in my career. My mom at one point found this page that I had done in second grade around, what I wanted to be when I grew up. And it's kind of silly to ask a second grader, especially now, what do you want to be when you grow up? But I had written scientist down and was definitely in that mindset of exploring more the sciencey math side of the house. And as I got older and was starting to apply for colleges, I grew up with my dad as went to school to be a nuclear engineer, since became a civil engineer and a project manager. And my mom was one of the first non-Ivy League hires over at Goldman when she was there. And so she started off with some of the early computer stuff. But since she, upon all three of us being born, had decided to take a step back from that, and then took on all the fun roles and jobs that you could have managed. And she did everything from being part of the .com boom to she worked at Scholastic for a bit, and she was a book talker. So she would go into classrooms before the book fair came, if anyone remembers the days of the book fair, and like get everyone hyped up over books. She ran a jewelry business. Now she sells title insurance. So she's always been really adaptable. But the key theme to her success has definitely been her ability to create connections with people. And so that's always been something that's been really impactful. But going to college, my dad had the approach of, if you want to do dance or have all these other hobbies, they're wonderful, but they're not a major. So take with what you will. You can agree or disagree with that philosophy, but we were encouraged to choose majors of things that had a bit more of a straightforward career path. So I majored in bioengineering, and I remember I had an interest in bio and had done some internships and things along those lines in high school. I was very fortunate to have those opportunities, and University of Maryland, where I went, had a program where they invited a group of women on campus as a add-on period to your orientation. Where if you had expressed interest in some of the science majors but weren't yet decided, they were here to try to make sure that, encourage you to go down a STEM path. So I knew I was interested in biology, but also, didn't have so much of a calling to become a doctor. So I was like, well, what do you do with that? So I attend this program and I learned about this thing called bioengineering. And I remember calling my dad and being like, this is what I'm going to declare. I figured, I know math. And he was like, I want to have gone on record as having had no part in this decision. And I was like, what? As a fellow engineer, aren't you excited? Are you proud? And he was like, I don't know, Jenna, maybe if you ever had any interest in how anything worked, I'd be supportive of this, but I just don't see this going well. And so I still went forward with it and did graduate with a degree in bioengineering. But he wasn't entirely wrong. Turns out that pipette men weren't quite the social stimulation that I was looking for. So I, knew that I wanted a career that had more of that. And upon graduating, was offered a position at Citrix, and it was in the fall. And as part of their hiring program for consultants, you come on and there's a series of programs for new hires at a college. And I remember getting the offer, and it was around Thanksgiving. And I was like, well, I don't think I'm going to take it.
Let me ask you something real quick, just about that, just before we talk through that offer. How in the world how do you go, biotech engineering?
Bioengineering.
How did that actually happen?
That's the question I was going to ask too.
It's so funny that you said, because I was having such anxiety over oh my gosh, I'm going to graduate. And I know at this point, I don't want to do research and be a pipette man, but I don't know what I want to do. And my dad gave me great advice. He was like, you need to take a breath. He was like, there's no decision until there's a decision. He was like, you're going to go into the career fair and you're going to throw a whole bunch of resumes out to the wind. Then we're going to see what comes back. And then there'll be a decision. So what Citrix saw in me, I still am not quite sure. I know that a lot of what, consulting at the time was, not at the time because they haven't done it for the last year and a half, but was traveling with people. So they were hiring a lot on personality and a lot on the ability to problem solve. Yeah. Kind of knowing that they weren't going to get somebody, or very few were going to be the people that were already Microsoft and Citrix certified. So that I figured that they could teach you that, but they couldn't teach you those other components.
That's really important, actually. Yeah.
And it's interesting because it still stands today that a lot of my closest friends came from those consulting days. And it was so much of DJ when we used to travel. the running joke was that it was like you were borderline dating the people you were staff with, because you were waking up in the morning, you were having breakfast with them, you were going to work with them, then you were coming out, people would take a little break, maybe you'd work out with some people or what have you, and then you'd have dinner with them, and then you'd repeat it all again. So by the end of a week, you could be like, oh, Andy doesn't like onions, Patty likes Merlot. Like, you could give everyone's little nuances of how they did things, because you were so you got very close with people very fast.
Jenna was my work wife for a while there. Yeah.
So when you were at the job, did you just happen to drop your resume down onto like the Citrix desk and went your merry way? Didn't know like anything about what they did? Just, hey, they're here. There we go.
I went through all the resumes they had, just like put them out. And the way the Citrix booth was oriented, there was a lot of very friendly, outgoing consultants that were standing on the outside of the booth because they figured not a lot of college students knew what Citrix was. So they kind of had to sell it at that point. So they were, anyone that was, had a smile, they were like, oh, come talk to us. Okay.
Nice. Very nice.
Yeah.
I think there's a lesson to be learned in there about just getting your resume, your name, whatever out there.
Totally.
Something like that. Yeah.
Yeah. And being open to things you might not have thought of, I definitely, because honestly, going into consulting and fast tracking like that is pretty wild. So was there like a interview process? Yeah.
I interviewed, and again, I got the offer, and then I wasn't going to take it because I was like, I don't know. Both of your points, like, I don't know anything about Citrix software. Like, what do they expect me to do with this? Like, I'm not going to be able to contribute. And my dad said, like, well, what other offers do you have? And I was like, I don't know. It's really early. Like, I got time. I'm going to figure it out. It's like, nah, I don't think that's how this works. And
hey.
We got into probably the biggest argument we've ever had. And he very intelligently encouraged me to sign the line, which I did. And then the 2009 came and the market crashed, and there were not a lot of jobs to be had. And I was very, very fortunate to have one, much less one that welcomed me as warmly as they did. They had started inviting me to team dinners and stuff, so I could start to get to know my other colleagues even before I started, and were really great about welcoming me into the family. So I'm super grateful for that opportunity and the fact that they, risked it on me, even though I didn't have the direct background. So
right. Yeah.
I guess the question becomes, what did your dad know that was upcoming about the Great Recession?
I think it was more just, he was like, if you end up finding something else that's really, really great, then we can walk this back, but you're not going to get another shot to accept this. So
right.
Sign the line, and then if need be, we can walk it back.
I like the idea that your dad could tell the future, but
he would like that too.
He would. I'm sure. Yeah. Very fun. So, tell us a little bit about the experience. So you signed up. You said, "Let's go for it." These are people that you are pretty sure you're going to enjoy working with, and then you're sent off to the Citrix Bootcamp.
Yeah. And at the time when I did it, now it's at least it was at some point, like, you actually lived in Fort Lauderdale for a bit at headquarters. When I went through it, everyone still did it in independent offices. And I was very quickly ramped up and got certified in Citrix and Microsoft technology. But it was a lot to learn in a very short period of time. And it was a lot of sitting by myself in a cubicle, learning material. And I remember at one point being like, I'm just done with it. And I remember like closing the book being like, I can't do another certification exam. Like, that's it. I'm getting up. I started to stand up, and then I was like, oh, wait, I'm an adult now. I have rent. And I just slowly sat myself back down and was like, this isn't an option. Like, back to it. Like, so it wasn't all pretty in the beginning. And I think even in the first few projects that I did, I never fully gained the technical confidence, which is why it was always so great to be paired with people that were more technical than me. But I always really appreciate that Citrix saw me for the strengths that I brought to the table and acknowledged that there were other team members that they could pair me with that would provide some of those skills and rather saw where I could provide some strength around project management and other components of navigating some of the customer dynamics. And so having a group of people that see you for your strengths. And Citrix is also really unique because for that program, every 2 weeks when you were on a project, you did feedback. So that entailed putting together 3 strengths, 3 areas for development, and then you sat down with who your project manager was, where on the project you were staff, and you reviewed them. And some people now are like, I can't believe you did feedback, like went through all of that overhead of spending all that time to do that every 2 weeks. That sounds crazy. But the reality is that some of my best learnings happened as a result of first being encouraged to self-reflect, and then second, having the forum set up to have some of those feedback conversations. Because I think there's a lot of things that either I wouldn't have gotten in real time, or that I wouldn't have, maybe that project manager wouldn't have thought like, oh, we should have a conversation around this. But once there was the forum to have it, I just gained so much from that.
I'll echo that too. That was something that was really an impetus for some changes that I requested to be made, was actually feedback that I was getting from those that were under me.
Yeah.
And so there was the feedback process kind of went both ways. It wasn't just like, oh, here I am from up high and I'm going to tell you everything you're doing wrong. It was more of, getting feedback from all sides. And so that was actually a crucial lesson to learn as well.
And I think that's the key, because a lot of times, I mean, I've been in the situation where you're asked to self-assess, but you turn it into your boss and that's it. You never hear anything else about it, So, I mean, so at that point, the self-assessment just becomes, all right, what's the best way I can phrase this stuff and still get a good raise or something? And without that other half of getting the feedback and having the talks and everything, it's they're exercises in futility otherwise. So it's great that Citrix did that second part where you met and you chatted through it and got help with that stuff or whatever you needed. And
the fact that it wasn't every 6 months, like, okay, well, we'll see you then. Like, incorporated it back, down the line when you don't even remember some of the context. It became very actionable to do it that way. So especially as someone that was so early in career, it was so valuable.
Absolutely. This actually reminding me of a conversation we had with George. Put the link on the screen here. So we talked a lot about this sort of thing about, getting and taking and processing feedback, and how, the company of the future needs to embrace that properly. So that's a great conversation for anybody who wants to go and listen to that episode. It's episode 6, just thrive-it.com/TC006 to get that episode. So awesome stuff. So getting feedback and all of a sudden you're out in the field. Tell us a little bit about your first consulting engagement.
Oh my gosh. I was on a large team for a healthcare customer, and there was a lot of big dynamics happening that were very much
we won't say the name, but would I know very obviously, very quickly, which one it was?
You may.
There's a certain client that pretty much everybody who was new got stuck in front of at some point. Yeah.
Well, and there was one subtask of the project that required something to be coded, and I didn't. Being a bioengineer, we didn't cover that. So, and you never want to ask like too many questions as a new hire without having first tried to figure it out yourself. So there I am Googling, like, how do I code? And needless to say, like at the end of the first afternoon, I turned around my laptop and it says like, hello world. And they were like, I'm going to need to put you on a different task. I was like, okay. So I think
hello world's important.
It's the first step to a broader world.
Exactly. I'm here. I'm showing up in it. I'm here, world. So I think there was definitely a dynamic there of trying to figure out, especially early on, how you could still feel like you're contributing value when you're still largely learning. and learning the right times to ask for help versus the times when you should be a bit more self-reliant and at least give it a go yourself. So there was a lot of learnings that happened on that project. It was very interesting.
Yeah, it's always tough when you're there's a certain wisdom in that too. There's a make or break moment where you realize that I can't possibly know everything about everything. So you become friends with Google. You get that if there's a PhD to be had, it's in how to search well.
Yes.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, and I think, especially in today's world, the rate at which technology is changing and adapting is so fast, and it just is continuing to grow exponentially in the speed of which things are coming out. So that skill of learning the confidence to say, I don't know, but I'm going to find out for you, and learning how to know what resources you have and know how you can learn information and who you can reach out to bounce ideas off of was a very early lesson learned that I think gaining that confidence was part of the turning point of me starting to feel just like a total imposter versus feeling like, oh no, part of my value is this larger pool of resources that stands behind the scenes behind me. And it's not a thing I should be ashamed of to say, I don't know it, but there's value in me in that there's other people that I have access to that I can get this information for you from.
Well, the fascinating thing about this is, and in both of our years of doing consulting work, and Jeff, you doing this with sales engineering as well, it's the same kind of thing. What companies are looking for most of anything is ownership. If you can take ownership of a problem that they have, you are going to be their friend forever. If you just, no, that's not in my wheelhouse, or I don't know, and just leave it at that, that's not going to make you any friends. It's really going to be the key to success. So I think right there, if somebody could take something away and write that down, it's that, taking ownership of other people's problems and just simply being willing to follow up on it and find the answer for them is a huge way to get forward in your career.
Yeah.
Yep.
I agree.
Yeah. So, okay, so we've got a few under our belt. At some point, there was more than just, hey, Jenna's just a consultant. There was some point where there was a moving up the chain a little bit. Tell us about that process a little bit.
I think I began to recognize the value that I could bring in terms of keeping things organized and just the simple value of, especially for our more complex projects that had multiple work streams going on, a lot of the value of looking out ahead and trying to make sure we had resources for future steps and all the organization that went into that, and gaining more confidence around, my greatest value is never going to be my technical muscle, but I do have a lot of other things I can contribute. And I think early on in my career, there were times when I was just I allowed that lack of confidence to become something that customers could poke into. And I remember there was one customer in Michigan that I was doing a health check for, and I asked the question of like, oh, what type of printers do you use? And he said like Halapi or something that had been totally outdated. And unknowingly, I just wrote it down because I didn't know any better. And then he started kind of laughing at me. And a colleague that I was working with kind of took note of the situation. And then when we braked, pulled him aside and was like, you're not going to treat my colleague that way. And knowing that I worked with people that were willing to stand up for me while I learned, but also then kind of recognizing that like, that's not the norm. That's that person's problem. That's not my problem. And like, I'm here to provide value. And if you're just going to not seek the value that I can bring, then that's not worth it. But definitely a lot there around just team dynamics, as well as beginning to embrace my strengths as I went along.
So damn Michiganders, I tell you. Sorry.
Yeah.
I'm in Michigan. That's right.
Oh, wait.
Was it east side or west side of the state? Detroit or?
I don't. It was in Grand Rapids, I think.
Oh, yes.
Is that right where you are?
Just outside, yeah. Was it
sure it
Jeff?
It wasn't in Grand Rapids proper. It was But yeah,
Okay.
it's my area.
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't want to go too far
That's
into that.
hilarious.
But honestly, I think that actually touches on an area where, if we can divert for just a second, it's something where it was a frustration I had. And I had similar kind of things happen when I was, leading teams. And Jenna, you and I have talked about this, like how, especially when I had a female consultant working with me, and the customer's at all dismissive, it usually just like pissed me off. And the first time I just I didn't know how to handle it. So I didn't say anything to the customer. I said it to my, our supervisor at the time. And he was like, call that out, He's like, don't let customers treat your people that way. So that was cool to have the it's not forward thinking. It's smart thinking. Like it's like treat people as you want to be treated. It's a core value. And
Yeah.
so
I wouldn't even say it's smart. It's just courtesy, common
Right.
courtesy. I
Yeah.
mean, it's like, yeah.
The challenge was, and we've all three faced this at some point, where you're sent to a customer and you just don't know what you're going to get. And most of these customers aren't used to dealing with consultants or whatever. I remember very clearly showing up at an office in the standard, sport coat, tie, and they told me to turn around and change and come back. They were like, look, you cannot be here in that suit. Nobody's going to want to talk to you. You're never going to be successful here. So it was great to know that even sometimes it was kind of nice, but at the same time, you just never know what you're walking into. And you're dealing with people like Jenna, like you're saying, where it's just like people just have bad days and have issues and have their own drama. And a lot of them are just kind of, they might even be ignorant of how they're treating people. They might even not know the difference. My friend Ken Broren talked about that a couple weeks ago, and the course that he does. I can pull out a link up here, but that was something that he talked about too. Is like some people just don't even realize what they're doing. They think they're being funny or clever or just whatever, and they don't realize that they're potentially hurting people's feelings and things like that, and so or making it difficult for your team. So yeah,
I've had that situation. So as TJ mentioned, I also do a lot of work with the special needs community, and so something where this comes up a lot is that the use of the word retarded. Oftentimes people will use it and they don't. It really takes a moment to pause to think about the broader, like, what do I know about this person? Because sometimes people say it and they don't mean it in a rude way. They just are ignorant of what they're saying. And the type of learning moment that I can pull someone aside with and have when it's that context versus the context of, oh, you're aware and you're choosing that option is a very different conversation. So
it really is, isn't it?
It also, there's a way in which to make that truly a learning moment versus a moment where someone feels attacked. And I think no one wants to feel attacked. If they feel attacked, then they're just going to get defensive and not be open to the conversation. So learning how to have those moments where it's a bit more of a pull aside and, you just wanted to, let you know that this is some of the greater context that, this is how this landed with me and maybe with others, and just wanted to provide that for you. Generally is well received because most people don't want to go around insulting others. They just, to your point, like they're ignorant of what the background is on that and what the weight of that means.
Absolutely. So
I know for that particular where, I mean, being the old man here, when I grew up, that was, it wasn't typically meant as offensive, but it was just the word you use, just like when when you talk about, Black people and all these different versions of words that were used, a lot of time, and one, you have to be adaptable. You have to understand that things do change, but a lot of times when we go back and we criticize people, oh, back in the day, they were doing this. That's awful. Those were awful people. I said, no, that was the norm for that time, and things like that. And so being able to take I guess for, someone like myself to, or at any point in your life, we know these words, and sometimes you don't understand the real meaning or what it means today, because the meaning of words change over time. And you have to be able to take, and I don't like using the word criticism, but take the feedback. And even if you don't quite understand it, being respectful of what you were just told is of paramount importance. And especially in the situations we live in today with how, things are, we have to be more respectful for what other people are doing and whatnot. So
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I'll tell you what, let's take a quick break. And at the end of this little message here, we'll hear more from we can talk through how we met and some of those fun memories there. So we will be right back after this awesome message.
This is Edward.
Hi there.
Edward is an IT systems engineer at Healthy Hospital. He has his eye on a job as an architect. But there is a problem. He is days away from being fired. Why? Because he has a hero complex.
Wait, a what?
A hero complex. Seriously, I have the most clear voice on the entire internet, dude.
Sorry, but what is a hero complex? I thought being a hero was a good thing.
It is good to be the hero, but when you fail to do your project work because you are troubleshooting issues for people that others could be doing, that is a hero complex. You are trying to feel good about yourself, but you are only hurting your career.
I had no idea.
Of course you didn't. No one told you. No one taught that to you. Until now, visit thrive-it.com/elevate to enroll in a course that will teach you how to properly approach your peers and your superiors. Now you'll be able to be the hero they need, not just the hero you think you should be. Thrive-it.com/elevate. Do it now.
Right. Yeah. So that's the course we're talking about there. That's Ken's course. Highly advised. Let's put it that way. Taking that, and I am reminded of something. We'll stay tuned to the end. There's another special I want to tell you about, but it's something that's only for today, so I can only tell you about it today. It's something I'll end up cutting out of the broadcast. So stick around for the end. I totally can't remember. I can't believe I forgot. What's wrong with me? Big things. It's September 21st. It's a special day for me. But we'll get into that in a few minutes.
I thought you were about to say that you forgot what you were going to do.
Well, I forget like what I was talking about, a minute ago. Like, what did I come in this room for? Who are you people?
What are we doing here?
Where's my wait?
Howdy, stranger. How's it going?
So the funny thing is, Jenna, I was actually trying to remember exactly what the first time you and I worked together was. I want to say it was in San Francisco, I think.
Oh, yeah.
I think that might have been the first time, but I'm not 100% sure. But yeah.
Right. I'm going to be honest. There's a few projects there that all kind of blur together a little bit.
Uh-huh. Yeah, well, and let's put this into context for people, just so they fully understand. A lot of times with Citrix Consulting, we would be sent out to a different customer literally every other week, or sometimes every week, depending on what you're doing. And so it's not like we're trying to be insulting to the people we've served, because, easily, 20% or more, I'm kidding, 80% or more easily, we truly enjoyed being there and loved being there, but they start to run together after a while.
Well, and that's, when you're doing it that often, going to new companies, it's there's nothing you can do but forget a lot of the people and the companies that you worked with and talked to. It's too much.
So there's a fellow consultant, mutual friend of ours, that was on a project and needed to step away, and so I was kind of in that role of take on. It was a very complex project, and so it was one of those things I specifically said, hey, you know what? Let's get someone to lead the project, like I was saying. And so fortunately, yeah, Jenna was able to come on and yeah, take that on, and that was a huge benefit to me. It's a very one of those kind of things that yeah. No, it was great. Yeah, because it was like a bunch of different lessons. One was living in your strengths, you know. But the other thing was kind of cool about this is um, realizing that no matter how much experience you have, the ability to be mentored is hugely important. And so for me to, say, okay, yeah, there's this person that I don't know, but I'm going to do everything I can to learn what I need to learn and let her guide me in those areas, And so that was an important pivotal lesson for me. It didn't hurt that it was somebody that was just fun to be around, and it's like those are the kind of things that really matter in a career that actually goes somewhere versus just doing a job. So yeah, that's a big thing. So yeah, we so many memories. Some of the people we worked with. I think in that particular project, that's how I learned why a certain consulting person that we've had on the show has the nickname of Nitro.
There you go. There you
Yeah.
go.
I learned very closely. And yeah, there's another lesson that I actually put in the book that is like, sometimes you think you know who you're sending an email to. But the thing is, it's not who you are sending it to. It's who's going to read it when it's forwarded 15 times down the road. And
That was always a big lesson of like,
Yeah.
don't ever put anything in an email that you wouldn't want forwarded on back to, you don't know if someone's not going to read down to the bottom of a thread and forward it out to internal, external. You never know where it's going to go. So be prepared.
Yeah. So we that was a lesson that was always learned the hard way. That's never an easy lesson to learn. But in our case, it got really ugly really fast. But grace under fire is something that you learn as well in these situations. So
Taking ownership of, I was listening to something the other day, and it's guaranteed that at some point we're all going to mess up. We're all going to fail at some point. If we're not, then we're not challenging ourselves enough. So it's
Right.
not a matter of if, it's a matter of when. So making sure that you have enough grace and clout in the bank that you can hopefully go off of, so that when the time comes, you can you have something to take a deposit out on, because you have to. We're all human.
Yeah.
Now, this sounds like a very interesting story.
Yeah, it's one of those things where it happened, it was like almost 10 years, maybe even close to 10 years ago, but even still, it's one of those things where it's just like, yeah, it's like, let's not bring out too many details. But at the same time,
what stays in the past, what happens in the past stays in the past. Let's just
the funny thing about all this is,
know.
that I'm also still in touch with some of the people that work there. And so it's been entertaining to see that, there's been relationships that have been ongoing over the years. There's that friendly, and it's because of how you handle things. It sets an example not only for your team, but in this particular case, what I'm talking about, it actually set an example for the customer as well. And actually, I got that feedback that it reformed the way they think about, handling things professionally and things like that. And so it was actually something where our benefit was well beyond just our scope of work.
Wow.
At that point. So it was actually kind of cool to hear that feedback way down the road. It was cool to see. Yeah.
That's so impactful.
But, yeah, it's always fun. And then, yeah. It's funny that there's a project that I do think the most about, though, is we were tasked with a very daunting project for a very major corporation up north of the border. And
That's the one that I always think of.
yeah, that was. So if you can picture, I think at one point there were about 7 or 8 of us from the Citrix team in basically what is a closet. It is absolutely insane the way this actually ended up being. It's like you have this big multi-billion-dollar corporation and they stick a bunch of us in a closet.
Essentially. Yeah.
It happens sometimes. You don't have room for people, and this is the best you can do. And so winter in Toronto, and we're stuck in a closet.
Mm-hmm. That's true.
Was there heat at least?
That was the problem. There was too much heat.
I'll say probably with everybody smushed in there.
And then I had requested that we get a filing cabinet in there, and people were like, "We don't have room for that." And I was like, I'm wearing snow boots here, which means I need professional shoes to be stored. So that's what that's for. And someone at one point like called me out on it. They're like, "You're using this to store a pair of shoes." I was like, "Correct." That is laptops that we're imaging, and also in the drawer below.
Also, footwear. Yeah. My gosh.
Come on, DJ. You got to have priorities.
Oh my goodness.
You don't want to be wearing boots everywhere throughout a building.
I'm pretty sure at one point every single one of us got sick and just gave it to each other. It was it was a nightmare kind of situation like that. But I actually got very sick. I actually had to be off the road for a few weeks sick. It was bad. But yeah, those kind of things, when you go through something together, it also kind of helps bond, and so I have fond memories of everybody that was on that team, some of which are actually still working for Citrix today.
Yeah, many of them.
But yeah, there was also some tensions, and there's more than once that a few of us had to tell each other, "Look, I need some alone time."
It was tight quarters, and it wasn't infrequent that we would often get to a point in a project where we would need things, and we would have asked for it several weeks in advance. We needed some databases made, or we needed some information, and then when we didn't get that, we're like, well, you have to understand that every day that you delay doing this is now you paying us to sit here waiting for you to get this information because we're billing. And that was always an interesting moment to navigate as well. But that team in general had a very work hard, play hard mentality. There wasn't really anything that people on the team wouldn't stake. Like, if people really followed through on their commitments to the project, but then also were took advantage of the time. And I think that was part of why we were able to do so much. And today in my channel role, often what I look at is the importance of trust building. It's really the foundation of people collaborating together, is if you feel as though you can trust them. And something I read was, or listened to from Simon Sinek, was explaining how trust is not an action. We don't do trust. It's a feeling. You feel like you can trust someone. So, in my current role, I'm often trying to think, like, how can I help accelerate trust? How can I hack trust so that people will get there faster and will be able to do more quicker? And Brene Brown has this great segment where she describes it in the sense of her daughter in her class, every time that the class performed well, there was a marble that would get put in this jar in the front of the room. And over time, the jar would eventually fill. And it's often these very small, seemingly insignificant moments that are those marbles that fill your trust jar. And, those are what you then rely on. So when you're thinking about whether it was that team, and then having, oftentimes, especially now, I think before COVID happened, it was, you kind of just went out to dinner to take people out, and there wasn't always the thought of like, well, what are we actually doing here? Why is this significant? And now that that's been taken away, it's like, oh, but like that bonding that happened when people broke bread was putting marbles in that jar, so that then when they came out onto the work field, whatever battlefield you were in that day and whatever problem you were trying to solve together, you had that foundation of, this is someone that I feel as though I can trust, and that I can share information with, and that I can count on to follow through on what they say they're going to do. And all of that is, no matter what role you're in or what industry you're in, is something that I've definitely been thinking a lot more about. And I think that was highlighted by, why was it so significant that we had mandatory funds some evenings, and, what did that really build for us? And that was part of it.
Yeah. And mandatory fun for those of you that haven't figured it out. That was something that was very unofficial but official with our teams. That there was just a point where we said, it doesn't matter who's picking up the bill. If it's the company, if it's us, we need to do this together.
Yeah.
We need to go. And Jenna and I were on the road enough together where we've both celebrated each other's birthdays on the road. So it's happened that way, and that's something that's just like you just never get over that. Really, it's something that's really truly important as a team. But also you can do that with your customers too. Is just have those kind of bonding moments. Absolutely, it's very important. Very important. I don't know why I'm just thinking about this jazz club we ended up with.
For your birthday.
My birthday, yeah. That was so much fun. It was and I was so sick and so exhausted. It's like, dang it, I'm going out. It was fantastic.
Once a week, there was mandatory fun, and we used to rotate who got to choose what we were doing.
Yes.
So
yes.
One week would be a comedy club, and then the next week someone would say, I want to go ice skating in Toronto's main area or whatever it was.
Yeah.
So, it was a fun way to kind of get to know other people too and see what they would choose. And
CN Tower I remember going to.
Yeah.
Lots of
when you're in Toronto, if you don't ice skate at least once, I mean,
you can even say you've been to Canada if you have.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh, yeah. Ice skiing and skiing are in that category of Deej don't do, but it's all good.
I think
my bum legs.
Not only ice skated on the official ice rink, I think walking to the office some days was another ice rink.
That was very much
a little precarious at times.
That was fun. Absolutely. And then actually, so we can also say that there's a cool moment a couple years after all this where we got to kind of shift a little bit, and I got to encourage and mentor Jenna, which was really fun to be able to kind of tit for tat kind of thing. Just kind of like, okay, well, she had some things she was wanting to do in her career, and I was kind of actually, Jenna, you might have been one of the first people I actually truly coached.
I'm honored.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun, but that was awesome to see how that could be a thing, which is another kind of lesson to learn. Is just your mentor or somebody who's mentoring doesn't have to be above you. They can be right beside you. And so that's an important thing to note, is that not all mentors are older and wiser. Sometimes they're younger and better looking. And it happens.
I'm not younger than you, DJ. I'm sorry. I appreciate the compliment.
Happens though, right? It's like you just never really know. As long as you're open to it, that's really important. So it was cool to be able to kind of give back.
Well, and I think that's key is you have to be open to it, because you never know who's going to step in and be able to teach you something. A lot of times you don't even realize it at the time, but those become very important lessons. So
absolutely.
Yeah, I think having that openness. I know now I'm on a team where I say, I'm so grateful that I'm with such a high caliber group of people that I don't have a choice. I need to show up as my best self every day, because I know they're showing up as their best selves. And it's not a competition type of mindset. It's more of just collaborative. And I want to make sure that I'm bringing forward to this team so that I can bring something to the table, because I know I'm also going to gain a lot of different perspectives. And also, something that I was discussing with my sister this past weekend, there's the concept of, you have, oftentimes we think of our support network and the people that, we have around us to help us navigate different times. But we were discussing the concept of a challenger network, and, the idea that if you truly care about someone, it's not just, I'm here for you to hold space for you, but rather, can I give you this feedback, and can I help you see things differently and help you become something bigger and better? and having that trust to have that conversation. And so while your support network is important, as I was reflecting on it, I was like, my challenger network is actually even the people that I'm closest to, the people that have, at various times pointed things out about myself that I wasn't self-realizing, or people that I was able to navigate through and kind of process things with, that coming out the other side, I felt like I had become even better and more self-realizing than I was before. So I think, you never, to the point, like you never know where necessarily those connections are going to start, but having that mentality that those people could be in and around you all the time is really powerful.
Yeah, that's really awesome. All that. Well, let's walk through a little bit more about so we're doing the consulting thing, and I'm not an employee, so I have this freedom of going in and out of the program whenever I wanted to. It was kind of nice. I could just sign on for 3 months and say, I'm gonna stay home for a while, or I'm just gonna go work in a cubicle somewhere for a little while, just take a break. So I got to do that. But as an employee, it was a little bit of a different dynamic, and I saw an evolution while I was at Citrix, actually, and Jenna definitely saw this as well, and maybe even helped contribute to this, where the needs of the person were brought up more, and so you can't just have somebody on the road every single week and expect them to survive. I remember having a conversation with I was with Stephen Lee, actually, about this, and just about how the concern was just like, the I think the way he put it was something to the effect of, DJ, if you were not here, we'd be healthier as a company. And what he said by that, what he meant by that was, we'd be healthier as a company if we didn't need to rely on people like yourself, at that level. If we could bring people up and keep them there, that was a real challenge.
Right.
And so, but eventually, it seems like most people that have stayed with Citrix, stay with technology, there's always some point where they realize, okay, either it's going to be me on the road doing this thing, or it's going to be me on the road doing another thing, or it's going to be me saying, this is actually my strength. In the years of developing, this is what I've noticed is my strength. And so it seemed like you had one of those moments, Jenna. So tell us a little bit about that.
I was at the time considering if I wanted to do project roles, project management type roles, and try to get my PMP, or what I wanted to do. And this opportunity came up to help our partners begin to develop their services practices. And it gave me exposure to an entirely different group of the organization, and a whole nother network of and side of things, which I really valued. But the dynamics of that team weren't exactly set up for success in that moment. So, and I remember my boss at the time saying, like, well, what would you think about doing a sales role and and I was just so afraid of the concept of a quota at that point. But then when the role opened up to start to become a channel business manager and maintain our relationships with our reseller community, once I started doing it, I was like, oh my gosh, this is what it's like to love your job. And I realized that what I had loved about consulting was that collaboration and that connection. And this then provided that to me, but I didn't have the same worry of, but being technical is a large portion of this role, which I don't feel confident in. It was instead a role that played a bit more to my strengths. And as I was able to hone in on what those were, it felt really good to find a role that aligned with those. And then, it wasn't that I stopped growing. Hopefully I didn't. Hopefully I've continued to grow. Yeah. But getting that further alignment was definitely really, really exciting for me.
Yeah. And then also a little bit of work-life balance kind of stuff too.
Yeah.
I mean, we definitely need to talk about Live Up and that journey, because oh my goodness, y'all.
I do a little thing on the side.
Well, I never, it's one of those things where, when did you first tell me about this? You were still in consulting, right?
Oh yeah. I started it pretty early out of college.
Right. Okay. So I thought, so for the longest time, Jenna not only did full-time consulting work, traveling back and forth across the country, but also ran a a nonprofit. So tell us about Live Up programs.
Sure. So when I was in college, I wasn't obviously near my family, and I felt really disconnected from the Down syndrome community. And so I started seeking out opportunities, and I'd always had this dream of opening a camp for individuals with special needs. So I started Googling it, and I realized that there was a group of individuals that had already done it, and in fact done a beautiful job of it, that were right around my age. And so I in that moment signed up to volunteer with that program, and really found a sense of community in it and got a lot out of it, and continued to do that for a week a year for a long time. But as I got older, and as I watched my sister get older, I noted that the real need was for 21 plus. And a lot of programming, it's definitely gotten better over the last 10 years, but a lot of programming cuts off at age 21. And to give context to that, my sister is 32, and when she was born, my parents were told that they didn't need to take her home and that they could just check her into an asylum. So at the time, even not that long ago, that was happening, and the quality of life in those institutions at the time was not, did not set the stage for thriving, as the case may be. So now obviously the culture around a lot of it's changed, and people like my sister lived at home and with lots of resources, and so very fortunately the average life expectancy is increasing, which is a really beautiful thing. But it also means that there's additional years of life which need to be accounted for and supported. And so I turned to the co-founders of the organization that I was with, and I was like, this is all good and great, but we need to come up with something for 21 plus. And they were like, okay, go solve it. So I worked with another two people that were part of that program, and we thought a lot about, what aspects of this have made it successful that we want to pull forward, and what aspects of it do we need to alter in order for it to be an adult program. So that was the start of Live Up program. So it had a different name at first. After that, we ended up going independent and changing our name. So, but the premises stayed the same, where we're a program that is 100% volunteer, and where each participant with Down syndrome comes and is paired with a similarly aged mentor. And together we do activities to build life skills, social skills, and build healthy lifestyles, as well as we're a community that just doesn't have volunteers, but that can volunteer. And, with all that too, a lot has evolved, because initially going into it, the mission seemed to be, we're here to create this fantastic experience to empower this group of individuals with special needs and help them gain confidence and independence. And being that we're one-on-one, a lot of what I then started to really connect with as just as much, if not more than part of our impact, was that a lot of the mentors that were coming had never experienced or worked with people with special needs or Down syndrome. And they were walking away now becoming advocates for the community. And what I began to recognize is that for me as a sibling that can't remember a time without being a sibling, trying to describe what it's like, and it's like trying to describe a color, I can't dissociate it from in a way in which I can properly put words to it. But giving people this experience and this exposure not only helped make them an advocate for the special needs community, but now we call, as part of our mission statement, as our goal is just to help make a more accepting world in general. And in light of a lot of the recent events, we really reflected on what is our place, and we hope that we not just create this community that people feel empowered and to have conversations, and but that we want all different types of staff to feel welcome, and all different, and trying to help, really foster a sense where, everyone is welcomed and set up for success to thrive. So.
Yeah. Outstanding. I always appreciated the vision. It's like whenever there's something that there's a gap, that's when it gets really exciting. When you notice it, okay, and it's a common struggle I hear a lot of. of special needs in generally, but especially Down syndrome. It's one of those things where it's just like you have these beautiful people that they just will always need some form of help, and that shouldn't be their identity.
Right.
And so what these programs are doing is having them be in community together. And I actually definitely want to talk about some of the mentoring stuff that you're doing as well, because that's just so innovative and cool to see that, like, an adult program like this doing. So tell us a little bit about that too.
Yeah, so each person that comes gets paired, and I think sometimes people come in with some background, or oftentimes people will come in with, like this understanding or this assumption that's kind of given, which is not necessarily a bad one, but that people with Down syndrome are happy. And the reality, like, yes, they very fortunately tend to be a population that does know joy, but the reality is that they're a population, they're people first who have all the feelings.
Yep.
And so
Intensely so, yeah.
Yes. And so giving people exposure to the fact that there are times when people with Down syndrome also feel frustrated, or they feel of different emotions, and it's one of those things where even being a sibling, like, doesn't give you, or having so much experience doesn't give you all the answers. And I've kind of seen that in a couple of scenarios. But I remember there was one time where my sister is on about a first grade level, and she knows that she's different, but she doesn't actually know that she has Down syndrome, versus one of the early women that I was working with was more aware of that. And at one point she told me, like, I want to get rid of my Down syndrome. And, like, having to navigate that conversation is just something that I was never prepared for. And being a sibling or doing all these things, like, that doesn't prepare you for that moment of, how do I navigate this? And
Yeah.
I think that it just goes to show that, kind of going back to our earlier point, that, we're never all knowing experts of anything, or all, there's always these humbling moments of, all right, like, let's use our resources and navigate this together and grow together. But you're never fully prepared. But giving people that one-on-one opportunity to really create connection then turns out to really make it a much more impactful experience.
Yeah, love it.
Yeah, and it sounds like a good way, that two-way street of, especially if somebody comes in that hasn't had a lot of experience with somebody with Down syndrome, it's a great learning opportunity for them as well, and to hopefully even spread the word.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, no, I think people definitely walk away as further advocates, and even oftentimes too, I think of it as, like, I'm not always aware as to all the long-term connections, but then recently I was talking to someone, they were telling me that they still kept in touch with the person that they were paired with all these years later, and it was still something that brought them a lot of joy, and that they were still maintaining a relationship from. So there's a lot of hidden things like that, or people will then later on down the line come in different experiences and be more accepting or understanding, and have more of a perspective of, we are more alike than we are different. And it's a really powerful thing.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's awesome. And I gotta say, if anyone wants to learn more or lend some support, liveupprograms.org is the place to go. So definitely check that out. You're doing things in multiple cities now. This is not just like one little thing, little 1 week camp or anything like that anymore. This has become so much more. Tell us some about the ways you've expanded the program.
So we now offer programs in cities across the country. And then right before COVID had happened, we were starting to think about, how do we make these more accessible? Do we offer these, like, one-day live up meetups? And then COVID happened, and all of a sudden we found ourselves in the situation where so many of our live up family members were so isolated and really craving connection. And we had one of our directors came up with a really creative program on connecting people to send letters or to do phone calls one-on-one for those that was more successful for.
Yeah.
And then we also started offering weekly virtual programs. And in the beginning, you know, we were all scrambling. So it started off as like karaoke and dancing and all these things. And then it was fun to watch it evolve, because then we started saying, well, why can't our participants lead these? So we had Carissa, who's certified in Zumba, start to lead the sessions, or, you know, people with Jackie with her favorite recipe, and Melissa, who cooks all the time, were then leading us, and they're like showing us around their kitchen, and they were leading the activities. And then we came to a point of, you know, what are other life skills that we could have that we could incorporate into some of this? And so we started a program called Friends Fit Feelings. And there's a concept called the zones of regulation. And the general concept of it is that each feeling is given a color. So green is happy, yellow is anxious or worried, red is angry or upset, etc. And so we presented this construct and then used the breakout rooms to have more dialogue around it. And, you know, the idea that, one, we all have these feelings, and how do we communicate them, and how do we not necessarily run away from them, but maybe sometimes we just need to color them out, or, you know, be able to express them. And I remember one parent reached out to me, and they were like, we were in the car taking John to go get his COVID shot, and we asked him how he was feeling, and he said he was feeling yellow. And we asked him to explain that, and he now had this construct where he didn't have it before to help communicate how he was feeling.
Kind of bridges the gap there. That's really awesome.
Yeah, so it was really fun to see what we were able to do that we hadn't tried before. And there was an incredible team of volunteers that had this amazing skill set that came together and came up with this series of activities around how we were able to communicate all this, particularly in a virtual setting. And I'm so grateful to all the staff and all the volunteers that helped run those programs and sessions. But it was also just cool to just see the impact we were having. And so I think, you know, while I'm certainly proud of all the programming we did, there's some in particular where I'm like, wow, like, we made a difference here. Like, this is pretty cool.
Well, I was just thinking to myself, the way to say this, because I don't want to like put anyone down or anything like that. That's not my intention here, but the blunt truth from someone who has worked in one of those, you know, aforementioned asylums, who has, you know, been in that side of things and seen the lack of any kind of innovation, not necessarily any lack of caring. I mean, that wasn't true. There were caring, but it wasn't really any thoughts of like, how can we move this forward? How can we, you know, better help them communicate with us? You know, how can we make them, you give them those bridges to be viable, something that they can very quickly reference, that they can say, okay, I'm yellow today. And that means this, we both have a framework now, and we can work through the rest of that.
Yeah.
And that's really what's been needed for a long time. So I just find it fascinating that a nonprofit is where the innovation of that kind of thing is happening. That's,
we didn't come up with that framework.
well, but you know what I mean? Implementing
That's the word of the framework. I want to be very clear.
Yeah.
Very people the person who came up with the zones of regulation. But I think that, you know, we all have this opportunity where, you know, I think sometimes people think of Give Back as having to be this formal, larger thing, and in fact, it could just be, you know, this little time a week, and be something that you're doing where you're like, I don't know if this is going to resonate. And the reality is it doesn't resonate for everybody, but if people are getting something different out of it, for some it was just the feeling of connection for an hour a week. For some it was a chance to lead for the week. If some, it was all these different things. And so just trying to be open to creating a flexible framework to meet people where they're at, which is also why we're one-on-one, is to try to be that flexible piece to help meet people where they're at and allow them to, you know, make progress in whatever that means for them. And I remember a sort of side story is that for a long time, my sister with special needs, my sister Lauren, didn't enjoy coming. And it was kind of this running irony of like, you know, Jenna's a sibling that helped co-found this program, and yet her own sister doesn't like to come. And the reality is she's just introverted. And so for her, spending this much time with other people is a lot of energy for her. So in recent years, though, she has started coming in. At one point, she came for just a day and a half, and she didn't necessarily participate in every program. We took some things out for her and gave her some additional alone time and things of that nature. And at the end, some people were like, well, aren't you disappointed that she wasn't here for these other activities? And it was a really cool moment to say, like, well, success looks different for everyone. And for Lauren, success looks like making it to this far in the program and having participated in these things. And like, that's a really big deal for her. And like, success for other people looks different, and kind of getting that moment to, and I think, that applies not only to, my sister, but even as I look around for myself, how I show up to different projects at work. And, sometimes someone comes in with like, oh, this is what success looks like. And you're like, well, actually, like, maybe we need to redefine success, or maybe for me, success looks a little bit different. And I think, sometimes success is becoming a CEO, but sometimes success is just really rocking an individual contributor role or doing different things. I think that we're in a time where that's really being challenged, and the possibilities of what that could mean in our current environment where people are working remotely and doing all these different things. It's a fun time to play with that concept, but that was a lesson that really was gifted to me from having volunteered that I was really able to see.
Yeah, because I mean, success in and of itself is an individual thing. I mean, like you said, what constitutes success for one? Yeah, maybe it is CEO for that person. Maybe it's, you ran the perfect project finally, or, near enough. It's very much individual, but we have this idea that, success is becoming the boss, doing this, making $1 billion and all this stuff. And it's like, well, yeah, that's one interpretation that you can have. But again, it, like a lot of different things in life that we just generalize, it's different for every person what that actually means and constitutes.
And how you communicate it too. It's people just sometimes don't know how to say, here's what my ambitions and goals are. So that's got to be that's a challenge no matter what. It's always going to be something. So encouraging people around to do that. It's just like, it's not, nobody has the corner on that particular market. That's part of our human condition, and we need to recognize that as well. Is that, I keep going back to that conversation with George. I need to watch that full interview again. Just go back to it.
It's funny, DJ, kind of off track a little bit, but you mentioned about the asylums and whatnot, and I don't remember the name of these. I'm going to call it a co-op, basically. But up in Traverse City, Michigan, started like 1800s for. You probably know what I'm talking about.
Yeah, I do.
And I don't even know how to describe it, but it was when my wife and I went up and learned about it and toured it, and it was amazing what they were doing in the mid to late 1800s. Had started from a mental health perspective and working with people, and it's wild because when they're talking this, and then like, what is it, the 60s, when lithium and stuff started being used, they said it turned into a totally different place, and now it's abandoned and stuff. But it was like right up until then, it was like almost a completely self-sufficient co-op mental hospital. I mean, it was a mental hospital in the end, but it was this huge. I think it started with a B or something, because it wasn't just one in the U.S. There was multiples, but not a ton of them. But it was amazing. The forward thinking, like I think back, 1850s, they just locked people up in asylums and called it a day. But they were, I think, in a lot of times, more forward thinking back then than we are today.
It was interesting because the one that I served in was in Hastings, Nebraska. And like most of those, they were originally set up as tuberculosis hospitals. And so there was a need to isolate a certain population. But then they became centers that they were to isolate people for other reasons, but they were usually set up with farms and things like that to where they were pretty much self-sustaining. And then, so we basically went from, and I'm going to get on a soapbox. I might even get emotional about this because it always has hit me in a very not great way. But we went from lobotomizing people to putting people in a community back to lobotomizing people with drugs. And the tragedy of this and where I saw the overreach of this was when we started doing that to children, and we started doing that to people with special needs in general that were able to be functional members of society, but it was in the easier path to just distribute some drugs or just be dismissive of that. See, I'm going to get emotional. It's going to happen. I'm on the edge, but just to say it, it's like if we don't treat people like people, we lose our humanity. And so that was why ultimately I left that field, is that I knew I wasn't going to be able to survive in that. I'm too much of a rebel rouser, to really, truly, just be able to take it lying down. And so it was a big problem for me. And it continues to be today, a little bit of a soapbox, but, I found other things to get on about, I guess. But
so I linked in the private chat the Wikipedia article, the Kirkbride Building of Michigan. There weren't a ton of those around the United States, but it's very interesting when you go through and read about these various buildings and what they built and what they had accomplished. And like I said, and it's not just the mental health. It was, from heating to like air conditioning type stuff, airflow, and they just all these different things. It was just amazing place. In looking into this, like, why aren't we doing a lot of this stuff today? It just so much. Like I said, to me, it was just so much forward thinking and better understanding and empathy for a lot of that stuff.
Yeah, this is actually a very, very similar model where there was certain things that weren't done that later were, like the no restraint model. That's something that in the majority of the work that I did at the what was later called the regional center in Nebraska was on a full restraint ward, where we did have people that were fully restrained and things like that. And that was just, or lobotomized via drugs and things like that. That, it was a shame to see. And I always wished that could be different, but it is what it is.
Yeah. Horrible.
Yeah. So fortunately,
I didn't mean to sidetrack there, but it's
important for people to realize
this
why.
Was so fascinating to learn that there were places like this, back then in just how, what I would say is, an advanced thinking and even the technology at the time that they had and was able to make do with is very amazing.
Yeah. It's awesome stuff. So Jenna, what's next? So you started working for Palo Alto.
Yeah.
Tell us a little bit about that and why you decided to make that shift and what you're currently excited about.
Oh, well, I got the opportunity to come to Palo Alto Networks, and it's just been a fantastic opportunity to work with a team that is such a channel-friendly company, and to be there at a time when, when I started 3 years ago, ish, little coming up on it. We were a Gartner leader in the next generation firewall quadrant, and that was our product, and that's what we were known for. And now, 3 years later, we're leaders in 7 Gartner quadrants, and so our portfolio has gone from 1 product to 18 products, and so it's been really fun. I feel really fortunate to have been there at this particular time. It's always been a great product, but as watching the holistic vision come together has been so much fun to be there for, and so much fun to get to work with our partner community around. And so, I'm excited to be part of what happens and continue to see what other potential growth opportunities there are and what that might look like is starting to be something fun to play with. So yeah, we'll see.
Yeah, it's awesome stuff. So I mean, it's kind of fun how going from studying biology and getting into consulting work and now into the channel progression. It's fascinating to see like the way that our careers progress.
Totally.
And I kind of know the answer to this already, but if you think you could tell yourself back in 2008, 2009, yes, the laughs are already there. It's like, how would you even formulate that conversation? How could you possibly explain that?
I think it's life just presents you things that you don't expect, and I think the opportunity to lean in and not be quick to say no, but to really, I'm so much of this also stems back from that moment of my dad being like, we're signing that dotted line, like taking that first step down that path. And sometimes it's a very clear next step, and sometimes it's we're gonna jump in on this one and learn as we go, and just embrace the opportunity. And I think more so than anything else, as I've worked at different companies along the way, the key thing that keeps coming back is just the power of the people you work with, and ultimately the culture fit of the company. Working at a company right now that values, so some of our core competencies, integrity, collaboration, and disruption, are things that I come up for me in conversation almost every day, and are things that I get to live out. And similarly, getting to create this magical community that's really comes together. I keep joking around that Live Up is a MacGyvered love child, like a whole bunch of people with really big hearts all give what they can. And through that, we're able to make a meaningful impact. And so I think you never know where that's going to come from, but surrounding yourself with good people that care about you enough to challenge you and to help you grow along the way is just a really great place to be. So yeah.
And always have a roll of duct tape. That's just the bottom line.
I'm just saying.
Yeah, she brought up MacGyver. Come on.
Duct tape and your own set of dry erase markers. That's
there you go.
I think Jenna might have been the first person I knew that traveled with her own set of dry erase markers, I think.
She learned a lesson early that the rest of us still haven't quite picked up on, is companies never have good dry erase markers.
Correct.
No, they don't. And so
I'm known for my dry erase ability as well as my notebook. There were people that had worked with me on one project, and then years and years later would be like, wait, you're the girl with the notebook. And I'd be like, that's right, I'm the girl with the notebook. I don't type my notes, I handwrite them and I draw my pictures, and that's my brand. That's what I do. So
yeah, honestly, and that's something that Nick and I talked about at one point too, is that A, you got to find what works for you. B, there's always ways to make what works for you work for you. So Jeff, we never really did the review of the Remarkable, the full kind of thing.
No, but we did talk about it.
We did talk about it. Yeah, it's kind of a cool thing that's allows you to just kind of take a notebook with you, and it's just like multiple notebooks in one. It's a nice little guy here. I'm sure that thing's getting a workout now.
It is now, yes, very much so.
I've got my notebook, always ready with the notebook.
Yeah, this is basically an electronic notebook, right? I mean, it's e-ink, right? Just like you're going to write. It's, and for me, this works. It's
that's all that
because
matters.
What's that? Yeah,
yeah,
exactly. And it's one thing. I know we've mentioned this before, but if you're sitting in front of your laptop taking notes, that's fine. But there's a perception that just because you're sitting there typing away while somebody's talking doesn't mean that you're paying attention, or that more times than not, they think that you're not paying attention. And that's why I love this Remarkable. I love, seeing people take notes versus having a laptop or even an iPad with a keyboard open, because you just don't know if they're actually paying attention or not.
Yeah. You've inspired a shameless plug. This is something. Well, it's because in this course I put together earlier this year, that's something that I talk about for like almost an hour. It's like that's a significant chunk of the assessment lesson, where that's something that I talk about. And so, yeah, that's a big piece of that is like not just distract. It's not just about distractions. You can be paying perfect attention, but people don't know if you're checking your email. They don't know if you don't feel as present in the room if you're not able to. You make eye contact, and they can see you writing, and they can see that you're writing, what you should be writing. So that's you get that one for free. The rest will cost you.
But first hit's free, man.
Yeah, that's like get the line. Yeah, but absolutely, that's something where you can actually dive in pretty deep with that, and all these lessons that all that we learned over the years. I decided to. Jen, I didn't even tell you that. I put together that course today. Bad deeds, no biscuit. Yeah. So I just basically put together a bunch of stuff that we've learned over the years, and kind of put our own take on it. But there's another thought that I had about this as well, and that is, coming back to mandatory fun. Sometimes people make the mistake of thinking that your company needs to provide the culture. Sometimes it's to you to bring culture to a company, and it's not, that's okay. It's a bad thing to try and force the matter, but if there needs to be a culture there, then bring the culture there. It's okay, to develop that, don't just mandate it. Even you might call it mandatory fun, but mandatory fun wasn't mandatory, but it was. But it's those kind of things too. And so if you can bring that to whatever your organization you're with, that's always a helpful thing to do as well. Just realize that's a healthy thing to do is bring your own culture to that. And I've been watching a lot of people apply this in a lot of different ways that I didn't expect, whether it be through like online communities, whether it be through, Jeffrey, you and I talked about this with the, is it, I guess, AVD group now? I don't know.
The user group, AVD user. Yeah, Azure Virtual Desktop.
And just watching things like that evolve. And, Jenna, you mentioned, kind of community development, this sort of things. And, the reality is, well, we talked about this with Laura a couple weeks ago too, is like, it's one of those things where it's like, you can't really always mandate the way the community is going to go, but you can help encourage it. And that's what's really important. And that's where we ultimately grow. So.
And I think there's also, like, if you go into a company that already has what could be a great culture, a good culture, still bring your own stuff. There's no cultures have to evolve, and it's you can still contribute, and there can still be change, for the better. It's so yeah. Don't be afraid to be yourself, be your culture. Bring it on. Let's see. Yeah. So cool. Well, I tell you what, gang, it's been a great conversation. Well, let's gather up some final thoughts. And actually, Jeff, I'm going to have you go first this time, because we're going to bring ourselves back in after this for those that are attending live. They'll get a little special bonus. But yeah, I'll let you have final thoughts tonight. All right. So my final thought is, it's interesting hearing the early years going into Citrix and all the support and everything that you got. Hey, I'm the first person that will be hard on Citrix. I will admit that, but I am also willing to praise where praise is deserved. And hearing about that program firsthand and how it was enacted and it was run that's a model for a lot of other companies. And that is a great lesson that, no matter what happens with Citrix one way or the other, that is a legacy that is something to be proud of. That's it. So
absolutely.
All right.
Cool. See you in a few moments here.
Yeah.
Awesome stuff, Jeff. All right, Jenna, any final thoughts for you today?
I think this is such a beautiful moment of the power of connection, and just how oftentimes you walk into situations and you don't know, you begin to interact with people, and the lessons that go across both ways, and the impact that those have is, sometimes you don't see that in the moment, but when you look back and reflect on it, it really has had such an impact. So I just am so grateful, DJ, that you reached out to me for this opportunity. And it was so great to talk to you and Jeff, and to get to celebrate just that power of two-way mentorship, and just the opportunity to embrace what comes at you, and being open to what those things are is fun.
Yeah. Outstanding. Love it. Normally I kick people off at this point, but there's something that I actually want to say to you, Jenna, and I want to keep you on for just another moment here. And that is to thank you. There was a time that was very rough for me on the road. There was a time that was really, really kind of a dark period, very confusing. There was, being in consulting and doing a lot of time on the road, it can be rough. And at the time, the program hadn't yet fully evolved, and so I was going through some just very, very tough stuff, and I had no sense of myself anymore. It was like, get on a plane, come home, get on a plane, come home. It was just like this slog, and it was a very tough time. And for me, there's some other things going on. It's one of those, just weird things. But anyway, so at one point, I started calling Jenna Sunshine.
Yeah.
And I never wanted. I always wanted people to not get confused as to why that I called her my sunshine, and it's because in a very, very dark period, she was one that would pull me aside and not allow just not allow it. She was one that would I don't want to say forcibly brighten the mood, but she would find ways to do that. And so my encouragement to you is that if you can be that for someone else, be that for someone else, first of all. But also be grateful for the people that are in your life when you're in those dark times, that are those lights, and those people that are not just positive, but proactively positive, saying, gosh, if you keep down this path, there's no good that's going to come of it, and just being very much able to call you out on your drama. So Jenna, thank you for that. Thank you for being that person in my life, and I really appreciate you. And so just thanks for coming on with us. I really appreciate it. So I'm going to kick you back into the green room, and I'll be right back with you. All right, folks. Yeah. So this is it's been an interesting time that we're going through, and so I am going to close us out today and just say that it's wonderful to have not only friends, but to see how we've all been growing over the years, and to know that 10 years from now we'll probably all just have a different perspective about this, but we'll also be able to talk about it and watch the progression happen. If you're somebody that's just starting out in your career, or been at it a while and just feeling a little frustrated, just know that there are people in your life that will speak into you. There are communities out there. There are even probably within your even workplace. I'm willing to bet there are people that if you let them into your life a little bit, it doesn't have to be like going out for a drink or whatever after work, although hopefully we'll be able to do that again soon. But finding other ways to be in a relationship is very crucial. Don't try and go this alone. If you're feeling down, be okay with being honest with people, and that is really a key for survival. And so that's my encouragement to all of you, is to go do that. So until next time, be well, and let's see, I know the right button to hit. So thanks for being with us, and we'll see you again soon. Thank you for joining us for another edition of ThriveCast. We truly hope you've enjoyed the experience and have learned a lot from it. Now, what we'd want from you next is to join us at thrive-it.com, where you can get subscribed to our multiple channels, get subscribed to our newsletter, and do more to get yourself to where you want to be in your career and your life in information technology. If there's anything we can do to help you, please give us an email at support@thrive-it.com. We'll see you next time.